Hey, feeling good, like I should. When in dark, I walk around the neighborhood. Feeling blessed, never stressed. Got that sunshine on my Sunday best.
Salete omnes. Happy sun. Wait, am I walking around the neighborhood when it's not on a Sunday?
It's gonna get difficult to stand, but hold your balance.
Ooh, salete omnes. I think I'm here on the right day, Saturday, November 21st. I'm honored to be here today as your 2020 Virginia Junior Classical League Convention keynote speaker. First, I want to pass along a maximas gratias to the co-chairs for their tireless work to host this convention online, even during a pandemic. After a successful National Junior Classical League virtual convention over the summer, the VJCL organizers went to work to host this exciting event for all of you Latin and Greek students in Virginia. So maximas gratias, co-chairs. Second, I want to commend all the JCL sponsors, chaperones, and volunteers who are working to make sure that all the contests are running, the Discamus presentations are going, and you all have a great time. And finally, I want to spotlight you VJCLers. You have spent days to prepare, but also now, these next 2 days, to commit towards excellence, integrity, camaraderie, and fun. You all, the students, are the ones we want to see thrive, not only in class and in JCL events, but also in the world. So speaking of the world, 2020 has been quite the year for it. Regardless of your political or personal beliefs, I think all of us can agree we have experienced unprecedented events this year. The events range from stark political divides, a deadly disease causing shutdowns worldwide, protests about police brutality and systemic injustice, the increased value of toilet paper, and the rise of words and phrases like synchronous, asynchronous, and red is sus. Unprecedented is a word I feel I've heard an exponential number of times recently. And since I can't help myself as a Latin teacher, I must share with you all the etymology of the word. Unprecedented comes from the Latin verb cato, meaning to go or to yield, give in. Literally means something that has not yet gone before or given into. When I look at that word, cato, I'm reminded of the famous quote from Virgil in Book 6 of his Aeneid. Tu ne cede malis, sed contra audentior ito, which roughly translates to do not give in to evil, but rather proceed ever more boldly against it. Yes, there may be despair, and yes, there may be evil and hurt and pain, but the author encourages us to fight more boldly against them. We are supposed to go on striving and fighting against the evils of the world, and how many evils have we experienced in 2020? I do think, however, we are often told to skip ahead from the hurt and the pain too quickly. We do not spend time to lament and consider all that has been lost. When I was working and living as a teacher in Houston, Texas, I both hated and I loved it. I hated that it was so hot and that it was so spread out, and whenever there was heavy rain, the streets flooded, the cars got destroyed. And in my 3 years in Houston, we had multiple rain flood days instead of snow days. The worst of it came during the weeks during and after Hurricane Harvey in 2017. And to give you a sense of how bad it was, let me tell you some stats. It was the wettest tropical cyclone on record for the United States. It displaced more than 30,000 people and required 17,000 rescues. It is tied with Hurricane Katrina for the costliest tropical cyclone on record, $125 billion. It closed the school I worked at for about 3 weeks. Families of the school lost their houses, cars, livelihoods. And the school building was devastated and had to be demolished because of the flood damage. And to this day, the school mostly meets in trailers while they wait for the new academic building to be built. At that time, none of it felt real. How could this disaster that upends life as we know it happen to us? In such a moment, I think the community had to take a step back and understand what had been lost. On a practical level, the school had to calculate the damages so that FEMA and other institutions could help them. But on a personal level, we had to grieve the loss of educational time and resources, the loss of lives, the loss of a place to call home. And before we could pick up the scraps and move toward rebuilding, we needed to mourn and lament and sit with those feelings. I don't think as a society we do that enough. And we need to acknowledge what has been lost from this past year and be honest about how we feel about it. That may look differently for everyone, and it could be triggering. I do think, however, we should lament. We should lament that we can't go freely to the movies or dine at all-you-can-eat buffets as we used to. We should lament that some families might not be able to gather during the holidays as they usually do. We should lament about not being at a convention center with hundreds of Latin students screaming cheers to show how spirited we are. Students, know that we adults are sad and lamenting too. And you should feel permitted to grieve what has been lost this year, whatever it might be to you. So take the time you need to reflect during this convention and the final few weeks of 2020. Lament as you reflect on what has been a turbulent and truly unprecedented year. But I can't leave you all with lamentation. With lamentation, there must be hope. We must have hope and work towards better. This is where I believe the convention quote, "Sibi quisque ruri metit," or each person harvests their own farm, makes a difference. In a way, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we have all been forced back onto our own individual farms. We're isolated. We have to till, cultivate, and now attempt to harvest what we have grown this past year. And for some, the crops might be flourishing and there are no problems. But for others, they might be struggling. Sometimes circumstances are out of your control, and it really is hard. If and when you can, I encourage you, though, to take ownership of the different areas of your life and reap what is sown in your fields. And next time, continue to sow better for the next harvest. My own field experience with Latin began here in Virginia at Lanier Middle School. I actually hated Latin in the beginning. I was never engaged, the verb endings never made sense to me, and it wasn't until I had a teacher in 10th grade who hooked us on Curtamen and the opportunity to win gold medals for the National Latin exam that I really started to dive in. It was something that I wanted to do, and I realized that I could do. I remember my first Curtamen tournament, though, as a Fairfax High School Latin 3 student in 10th grade. We were crammed into a tiny classroom with those cheap lift lid desks at George Mason University. Our level didn't get to play with buzzers, so we had to slap on this 10-inch wide surface that probably wasn't sanitized very well. During that tournament, I got 0 questions. I remember feeling so clueless. My teammates, I think, felt really bad for me. They deferred to me and let me give a simple answer like Hannibal for a bonus. From then on, I felt motivated to try harder, though. I studied dates of Roman battles for history on handwritten flashcards, and I learned some Latin literature facts like who wrote love poems to Lesbia. After a couple of months of studying and practicing, my team competed at the TJ Curtamen, and we did pretty well. We made it to the finals. And somehow all the hard work paid off because after an intense final round, we won. We even beat Flint Hill. And that victory sparked my love even further for classics. I went to national JCL conventions. I played on the state Curtamen team. I transferred from Fairfax High School to Flint Hill School specifically for Latin. And I performed an original song with a Latin refrain from Cicero in the 2010 NJCL That's Entertainment. I traveled from Virginia to all over the United States and the world, but it didn't start easily. I was fortunate, but I had to take ownership of my own plot of land and put in the work necessary for a rich harvest. As tempting as it is to view this year's theme and my story as a lift yourself up by the bootstraps or to remain in isolation to work on your own farms, I actually exhort you to think broader and outside of yourselves. We must understand there is actually a larger collective farm, humanity, that we must care for. Sibi quisque ruri metit can also apply to our entire world. During 2020, we must go beyond politics and division. Regardless of whatever disagreements we have with others, we need to be responsible and see the dignity in each individual person. We must be responsible by wearing masks and washing hands. We must take care of the environment and abate climate change. We should feel compelled to listen to and stand in solidarity with Black, Indigenous, and people of color. We should support the LGBTQ+ community. We should be respecting women. We should be advocating for differently abled people. We should be welcoming immigrants. We should consider those whose life experiences are different from our own. We really should be valuing all lives. And when we see the human dignity of those around us, outside of our own farms, especially of those who are different from us, then we can unite to become stronger. The arguments in the comments sections and the cancel culture that have ensued are not helpful in creating a flourishing collective farm. We need one another to make this happen. Last year was kind of a homecoming for me, back to my home field. You know that Hamilton song that Jefferson sings, like, what I miss, Virginia, my home, sweet home, I'm gonna give you a kiss. and I realized I'd missed a lot since I'd gone. Upon graduating high school in Virginia, I had the privilege to go to Maryland, Italy, Texas, Massachusetts. And in these experiences, I got to sow and harvest my little farmlands in these different places. I built deep, diverse communities and friendships with people in different neighborhoods, schools, churches, and workplaces. I made the intentional effort to see the humanity in every person I encountered, no matter how different they were from me. In fact, I believe these differences helped me to grow as a person to love, empathize, and seek justice well. I bring all these experiences from different farmlands back to my home field at Flint Hill School and the Virginia Junior Classical League, where I hope to make a positive impact for all people, and especially those on the margins. I intend to seek every individual's fullest flourishing and holistic societal good. So what does the responsibility of doing this work look like? It can be as simple as saying, hello, how are you? You want to play Among Us? To another VJCLer during the virtual VJCL convention this week. It can be a chat message through Zoom that complements someone else's background or their properly made bed. It can be intentionally reaching out to those in your community, your school, your delegation, to check in on them. In your own physical communities, be on the lookout to see how you can serve those around you. Be real, be authentic, be a person. You have a responsibility to harvest your own field, yes. But your field is bigger than your own physical space or your Zoom screen. And to be clear, if you are still in a position of lamentation, you have permission to stay there. Just know that you have people who love and support you, and you are not alone. So omnes, as you go forth and enjoy this year's VJCL convention, be sure to consider the theme of Sibi quisque ruri metit, not as a quote of selfishly improving your own plot of land, but also cultivating and taking care of the land of the collective VJCL and humanity itself. Gratias omnes.
Everyone falls down sometimes, but you just gotta know it'll all be fine. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Hey, feeling good, like I should.